This program is brought to you by Globus.
Hello to you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another edition of your discursive program. It is Global Insight. We continue to discuss what is making headline news across the globe, of course. World affairs, we talk policies, we talk geopolitics and diplomacy and how this is shaping, especially the narratives in the new world order. And today our focus is on the recent diplomatic strategic visits, of course, by two very important head of state to the China, and we are looking at the stakes of this visit, ladies and gentlemen. Together for 2 hours, we'll be discussing all of these stakes and how it is shaping the narratives across the globe, and particularly how individual countries can use these strategic meetings or summits to redefine their own roles of diplomacy and the strategic engagement in a multipolar setting. Just to note, ladies and gentlemen, that today's program it's actually going to be done differently because it is actually co-presented, and I'm pleased at this moment to introduce to you Rita MOTO. Welcome, Rita.
Thank you very much, CLARISSE WIYDORVEN, for having me on this platform and in this show with your edifying guest. It's a pleasure to be with you. Although I have a very bad voice this morning, but we're going to cope with it.
Absolutely.
So, CLARISSE, you know, the diplomatic center of gravity has definitely shifted eastward with back-to-back visits of Presidents Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin to the country of Chinese President Xi Jinping. And we can see that Xi Jinping has masterfully positioned China at a position or at an ultimate global power broker. This unfolding drama is rewriting the rules of the modern multipolar world order, CLARISSE.
Absolutely. I think we cannot make that assertion. With our panel of experts, we're going to understand if actually China has positioned itself as a catalyst or actor to broker peace and, of course, curtail some of the turbulence that we are facing in the global world at this juncture. Ladies and gentlemen, we can say, of course, that global alliances are actually taking momentum as world affairs evolve. The turbulence in the Middle East and elsewhere across the globe warrants quick, systematic solutions. The world focus this week on China these days as President Donald Trump of the U.S. and Vladimir Putin of the Russian Federation visited their China counterpart Xi Jinping for strategic meetings that attracted global attention. How the world-based order of the complex multipolar society will now shape, of course, the trajectory of strategic and diplomatic interaction happens to be one of the questions asked by many stakeholders, pundits, and of course analysts as they watch the meetings between very influential leaders of the world. China is not just, according to some analysts, another player on the global stage. It is, or stage, it is increasingly becoming one of the main arenas where global power is being tested, negotiated, and displayed. The recent visit linked Trump and Putin raised a bigger question, ladies and gentlemen, than diplomacy alone. What do these moments reveal about China's place in the shifting balance of international influence? The discussion goes actually beyond protocol and official statement. It looks at how Beijing is positioning itself between rivalry and partnership, between economic strength and strategic caution, and between national interest and global responsibilities. The visits of Trump and Putin are therefore not only political event, but also it signaled how the visits actually signaled how the world order is being reshaped around the People's Republic of China's rise. At stake is more at stake. It's more than symbolism, of course. We're here not talking just symbolism, but how these visits, strategic visits, will actually change the pattern of global interaction and cooperation in today's complex and tumultuous world. Why? Because of the numerous crises we're facing around the Middle East, across the African continent, elsewhere. Now it's time for leaders to actually redefine the terms on how to engage internationally while looking at issues like sovereignty, energy security, trade, security alliances, multipolarity, and of course, these are some of the factors that occupied the meetings between the presidents of China, Xi Jinping, and most especially his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. And we cannot actually forget the engagement with the US President Donald Trump. And of course, we bring us to this juncture, and multipolarity all come into focus when major powers engage. China on its own, defining the terms of the new global order. How true to fact is that? Of course, we're going to see that with our panel of experts, ladies and gentlemen, to note that today's conversation will therefore examine to an extent how power shift in depth. Is China emerging surely as the center of a new geopolitical balance? And what do the Trump and Putin visits tell us, or the entire world of international relations, about the future of global influence in the moment of shifting alliances, realliances, and of course new alliances being formed as the world is evolving? Rita, I think that this is actually a very important topic that we can't wait to listen to the viewpoint of a panel of experts this day to continue to enlighten, to educate. We will introduce them just after the jingle.
Thanks once again for joining us. This is Global Insights, and we are looking at the stakes and challenges of the visits of President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin to China, which is becoming one of the global stage of power dynamics. And we are having today an enticing and very interesting panel. We are going to unravel them this afternoon to discover the mystery behind these strategic visits. Within five days, within 1 week, we are going to unravel the mystery behind these visits and what is actually the result or the repercussion within the countries and also on the global stage. So I would have to introduce our first guest. We have Mr. Thierry Laurent Pellet. He's a serial entrepreneur, executive advisor, and a geopolitologist joining us from France. Mr. Pellet, welcome.
Thank you very much for welcoming me to the show today.
The pleasure is all shared. Thank you very much. We equally have Mr. Caleb Mopin. He's a journalist and author, a political scientist, joining us from the United States. Mr. Caleb, you're welcome.
Glad to be here.
Clarisse, you could go on with Mr. Halle Schlanger.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's take our next step now to stop to Germany to welcome Halle Schlanger, who is an international spokesperson for the Schiller Institute. Of course, has been very valuable on the platform of Global Insight as we continue to unravel world affairs, understanding how this is shaping the future of the world. Welcome to this edition of the program, dear Halle.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation and greetings to all the guests. And I think we should have a very interesting discussion.
Absolutely, very interesting as usual. Let's start in I think we go to the United States of America. This time around, we are saluting Dr. Ashil Eki, who is a banker and corporate finance expert. A pleasure having you this day, sir. Your mic is muted, Dr. Ashil Eki.
Yes, sorry about that. Thank you. Can I just thank you for your co-host? I haven't had a chance to get her name yet, and pleased to be part of this fantastic panel. And I want to thank my co-debaters today, and the topics are very important, and then we need to share enough information for our listeners to be able to, understand what is really at stake in the world today. Thank you for the invitation.
Indeed, understanding today's events to see how they can shape the future of tomorrow. Just to note that we have a lady on the panel, of course, is joining this platform for the first time and joining us, of course, from Mongolia in the person of Dr. RITA, who is an interdisciplinary expert. It's a pleasure having you on this discursive platform of Global Insight, Dr. Ari.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. Looking forward to having a very interesting and knowledge sharing program with you. Mr. Jason Ross will be joining us subsequently as we unravel today's conversation. Without much ado, we go, Rita. First of all, it's a tradition on Global Insight to always give our guests the opportunity to do a holistic interpretation of the event, particularly on the visit to the summit by many major leaders of the world. We're looking at Xi Jinping hosting Donald Trump, and from there hosting Vladimir Putin. What lies ahead for the world of multipolarity? I think we can go on with the first
And
speaker.
exactly that's what's inviting me to call on Mr. Thierry to tell us, how has China's handling of these consecutive visits rewritten the diplomatic playbook? Like, we have China, Beijing signal to the world by offering Donald Trump a rare privilege of a private compound garden stroll, while simultaneously giving Vladimir Putin a massive 25th anniversary red carpet reception. So what was your impression about this? Mr. Pellet?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, the question was directed to me. Actually, regarding, in fact, the demonstration that has been set up by Vladimir Putin during the 9th of May, it was pretty much less impressive than whatsoever was set up last year. Actually, I was attending to this event, and sorry.
Go ahead, sir. Yeah, we're all listening to you.
Okay, but are you related the question regarding, in fact, the défilé that was set up in May, or the visit of Vladimir Putin in China? Because the sound is not it's very difficult to hear.
How did you interpret the events that happened in China from President Donald Trump of the United States of America to Vladimir Putin of the Russian Federation? You as an analyst actually very concerned with geopolitical dynamics. What interpretation did you give to this two visits, historic visits, we can say?
Okay. So basically, you know that Donald Trump has been pushing back his visit to China due to the context of the Iran conflict. And the way that I would interpret it is that private Donald Trump is trying to save the President Trump. So basically, I look at it like a massive communications operation, which hasn't been leading, in fact, to anything really concrete. And before to go in depth regarding what has been developed during the meeting between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump, I would like, in fact, to look a little bit at the context in which, in fact, this meeting has been occurring. First of all, if we are looking at the economic context of America, what we are observing is that Donald Trump has been betraying his electorate. He was promising, in fact, to counter the inflation, and the policy that he has been putting together against China has been completely generating the opposite. the tariff story was a real disaster, because the price of goods that is practiced by China has been backfiring, in fact, to the consumer, and the taxes were paid by the people that were importing all the goods. So basically, instead of helping America, he has been generating a massive inflation that has been drowning the population into debt. He has been also promising that he will be releasing the Epstein files, which has been done just partially. And therefore, there is a huge expectation of the American population on this regard. He was saying that he didn't want to hear about CBDCs. And when the massive, beautiful bills was shifted from the Congress to the Senate, the ban of the CBDC has been disappearing. So basically, in fact, the expectation of American people are such that they are very disappointed. On top of it, the American economy is in such a state that right now there are difficulties, in fact, to raise debt. Every day, America has to pay $2 billion in debt, and the interest rates at 10 years, the T-bonds 10 years are raising in a considerable manner. This week, it was raising to 7%, sorry. So basically, Donald Trump is internally, on an economical point of view, in difficulty. And what he was trying to is to find some help to get out of the quagmire that the Iran conflict has been set up for him, because he don't know how to exit.
Okay.
So basically, if we are looking at the different topics that has been discussed, there were some common grounds on which they would be able, in fact, to settle down. But there is a lot of other points that were completely conflictual and impossible to solve. So basically, I would like, in fact, to go through each of those points in the way that we understand, in fact, the purpose of the discussion. So what do we know right now is that China is getting rid of all the bonds of America, and they are not renewing, in fact, the bonds. They are just focusing on investing in commodities, and they are emitting actually debt in dollars in the way that they will be raising enough money to finance all the states that are linked to the Belt and Road Initiative. They are rebuying their debts to the IFM. And instead of being reimbursed in dollar, what they are asking is to be reimbursed in yuan or in commodities. So basically, if we are looking at the bond market right now, United States is in very, very big difficulties, because Japan is getting rid of the US bonds. China refused, in fact, to continue to finance, in fact, the US debt. Russia, due to the conflict between Ukraine and them, are completely banned of this market, and which make Trump in very big difficulties. So basically, when Trump is saying that Xi Jinping is motivated, in fact, to invest $1 trillion in the economy of United States, I am just wondering if this is a lie or if it is communication. I wouldn't see the reason why Xi Jinping would be investing $1 trillion in the US economy, detrimentally, in fact, to the job market in China. Because this would mean that he is pushing investment in the way that Americans will be building whatsoever China is building right now. So this is a nonsense. Regarding, in fact, the problem of oil that the Detroit of Hormuz is representing for China, I do not believe that this is so much of a problem because as China
Thierry.
is buying the oil from Iran,
Sure.
I don't think that they would attack, in fact, their ship, and they will leave them, in fact, going without any problem and without any fees.
Okay, we'll come back to you subsequently, Thierry, for more details on the topic. While we get also the introductory, interpretation from our guest, because just to note that some of our guests will be leaving the conversation just after the first half of the show. So on this note, let's go to meet Halesh Ranga, who is actually in Germany. Actually, when we talk about this visit, we are looking at how they can help to solve the problems of the world, especially that we are in the world that is overwhelmed by lots of wars. So the aspect of peace comes to the fore as we continue to analyze not just the diplomatic sovereignty terms discussed, but let's look at how these strategic meetings can curtail the tumultuous, characteristic of the global world.
Well, I think we have to go back to the question of the context as Thierry was talking. I have a slightly different view of the context for this, which is that we're actually seeing two simultaneous processes that are irreconcilable. On the one hand, you have the end of an European imperial order of 500 or so years based on extraction of raw material wealth from the poorer countries, based on control of trade, control of currency, and the use of military tactics to suppress any opposition. And this is a part of the world which is in deep trouble. As Thierry was saying, the US is hopelessly in debt. So is the United Kingdom. Germany is in a very terrible situation because of bad policies on energy. And the West as a whole, which is used to having its way with the global South, no longer has that because of the emergence of new leadership and demands for sovereign rights, which, by the way, are backed by both President Putin and President Xi Jinping, with the BRICS alliance, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and so on. So you have, on the one side, the collapse of an order, and on the other side, the emergence of something new, which has a different idea, at least as far as it's expressed by President Xi Jinping, with the idea of win-win, mutual benefit. Now, that's the only way you can get to peace. As Pope Paul VI said, development is the new name of peace. And we see that in countries that have not had the access or the right to develop their own raw materials or improve the situation of their population. That's where the call for sovereignty is so profound and is supported by the motion of the BRICS and so on. That's not what President Trump wants. That's certainly not what the City of London wants. And I would say the European Union is very much under the direction of the United States and Britain, that is Wall Street and the City of London. So there were differences, very strong differences. Trump was hoping to get some benefit out of it, to help with Iran. But how could Russia or China offer help with Iran when they're opposed to this kind of violation of international law? So what we're seeing was some friendly chatter, a nice tour given to President Trump, but he came back with really nothing. And on the other side, Putin had very specific targets, agreements, and these were signed. And I think so we're seeing the differences, the divergence between the imperial order and the new multilateral order very clearly from these two visits.
Yeah, that's true. When talking about those who came out with something productive from this meeting, we could really tell that the USA went for a red carpet show, but we can't really tell that there was an outcome from this visit. So, Mr. Caleb, could you tell us what's the essence of having this kind of a meeting and getting out of it after visiting China, one of the power brokers at the time, and there is nothing to show for from by the United States President Donald Trump, whereas we can see over 40 cooperation agreements that were being agreed and signed between Beijing and Moscow.
Well, you can contrast the two visits, the visit of Russian President Putin to Beijing and the visit of Russian President Trump. It is no accident that one came after another. And Donald Trump came back with nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. They had this whole thing that the New York Times was talking about, the 4 Bs and the 4 Ts, and nothing came of it. The response, of Donald Trump and Marco Rubio's team is they said, well, China said that Iran will never get a nuclear weapon and doesn't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Well, Iran has said they will never get a nuclear weapon. They've said that for 47 years. That has been their position. That may change as a result of the vicious U.S. attack, but they have never proliferated nuclear weapons. They've never violated the International Atomic Energy Agency's restrictions under the treaty. And so for China to say that they would like Iran as a signatory of the Non-Proliferation Treaty to continue to fulfill their obligations under the treaty, that's not a huge victory by any means. That's just a standard position. And part of the deception of the U.S. war against Iran is this claim that somehow Iran is trying to get a nuclear weapon, and somehow convincing China to agree that they shouldn't was some victory. I mean, this is just something intended for very ignorant American audiences. The other thing is that China said they want the Strait of Hormuz to be opened. Well, the whole world wants the Strait of Hormuz to be open because the oil prices right now are through the roof. And Iran also wants the Strait of Hormuz to be open, but they want to make sure that they have their security protected. And when they're being bombed and when they're in an active war with the United States that murdered their supreme leader and blew up the elementary school in Manab and killed all kinds of young schoolgirls, they have to respond militarily. At this point, the big question hanging over the world economy is the fact that there's another strait, a strait very close to Yemen. I don't want to mispronounce the name, but if that strait were to close down, in addition to the Strait of Hormuz, if the Ansar Allah Houthi organization were able to move ahead and close that strait down, the world economy would scream even louder than it's screaming right now. So Trump came back with absolutely nothing. That China wants the Strait of Hormuz opened. So does everybody, including Iran. China doesn't want Iran to get a nuclear bomb. So does everyone that signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, including Iran. Trump had nothing. Whereas, if you look at Russian President Putin, he came back from Beijing with a very powerful statement about the emerging multipolar world. That declaration that we saw from China and Russia was very, very powerful, pointing towards the need for a new economy beyond the old colonial order. It pointed towards the possibility of eradicating poverty, a world beyond the golden billion that live in luxury while so many countries remain underdeveloped. And that was very, very exciting. And as a patriotic American, I must say that the only future my country can ever have is to align itself with this rising new economy and get further and further away from France and Britain and Italy and Germany and all the old colonial powers of Europe. And as we celebrate the 250-year anniversary of our country coming up in July, we should remember that our founders fought against the British Empire system and that they wanted development. Now, unfortunately, that development involved, slavery. It involved taking land from Native Americans. But the essence of the American Revolution 250 years ago was a demand for economic growth. They wanted to grow. The British Empire wanted America to just be a temporary trading hub in their global sea-based empire. And the founders of the United States, for various reasons, wanted an actual strong economy and industrialization of the American continent. And that was the essence. And that's what countries all over the world right now that are aligned with the BRICS want. They want development, whereas the British have decided there are too many people in the world and they're just going to keep the world poor in order to keep themselves rich, have the entire world centered around their mighty financial center. Well, humanity is rejecting that. America should reject it as well. And that's why my hope is that something can come of the talks between the U.S. government officials and Kirill Dmitriev about the Bering Sea tunnel. If we could build a tunnel connecting Alaska with the Russian Far East, that would be one step toward America getting closer towards the rising new economy in the East, one step further away from the dying NATO order. And I look with great admiration to Ibrahim Traore and everything happening in the Union of Sahel States. That is the future of the African continent. It's the future of the world. Africa is the future. Gaddafi's Green Book, before he was murdered, he published, and he had published a very important ideological text, the Green Book, and it said, black people will prevail in the world. And it pointed out that the African continent, with its resources and its rising population, is where the wealth of the world is going to come in the coming centuries. And I think we're seeing that. Africa is the future. Russia and China are aligned with Africa and rising. America has continued to align with the colonizers, with the British Empire, and with the Zionists. And if we continue to go in this bad direction, we're going to sink with them. We're going to go down with them like the orchestra that was playing as the Titanic sank. So I hope that in America we can develop some kind of anti-monopoly coalition, pro-growth coalition of people who want development, people who see the rising new economy not as something to oppose, not as a competitor, but rather as an opportunity for America to engage with China, with Russia, with all the countries of the world in win-win cooperation. That is the vision that the Center for Political Innovation, my organization, puts forward, and we have put that forward across America with our outreach, and we intend to continue to do so. I'm about to head to the airport and go to a rally in Michigan where Joe Kent, the former U.S. counterterrorism director who stepped down in opposition to Trump's attack on Iran, will be speaking. And I'm hoping to be there at the rally to speak with him and others that are opposing the war moves that the U.S. government has carried out, the threats against Iran, the threats now against the island of Cuba, the violations of the sovereignty of Venezuela, the kidnapping of their leader. What we need in America is not a government that is committed to regime change and wars and interventions and propping up the dying British Empire system around the world. What we need is a government of action that will fight for working families and engage in win-win cooperation, productive trade around the world. That is my perspective.
Absolutely, we need a cooperation that is mutual, that is a win-win. Caleb, like you just highlighted, pointing the African continent in the preamble, we said this, that when major leaders are meeting, others are watching to see how they can actually readjust their own preamble or the stakes of diplomacy in their respective nations to be made relevant in the world of multipolarity, in the world where we no longer talk the old, the rules-based order, but then where we see the alternative of the rules-based order and how we're supposed to take it constructively to give more meaning to this philosophy that the world is a global village. And on that note, we want to introduce to you Dr. Ashil Eke, of course, presenting the African perspective. With all of these strategic meetings, we know the African continent has been actually the voice of African countries have been resonating across the international arena. But then there is still some sort of, it's still very subtle in terms of making decisions, particularly internal decisions that will circumvent its international agenda to give meaning to its involvement. So to you, Dr. Eke, with an editorial, particularly on how the recent meeting affects or can affect the African continent in the nearest future and in the world of international cooperation and interaction.
Thank you, Clarisse. Thank you very much. When the presidents of the United States and Russia fly to Beijing in the same week, the message is clear. The world is reorganizing itself without Africa in the room. Xi Jinping, Donald Trump, and Vladimir Putin are not just talking about Taiwan, Ukraine, and Iran. They are also talking indirectly about cobalt in Congo, copper in Zambia, lithium in Zimbabwe, gas in Mozambique, and the sea lanes and ports that move African resources to their factories. China uses these summits to stabilize its rivalry with Washington and tighten its alliance with Moscow. With Trump, Beijing talks strategic stability between the two biggest economies on earth. With Putin, Beijing signs more than 40 agreements and declares that China and Russia are important centers of power in a multipolar world. In both cases, Africa is not at the table, but it is on the menu. Our minerals feed their energy transition, their weapons, their chips, and their profits. Today, the West is openly challenging China's control over African minerals. Washington is putting money into new rail corridors, port projects, and offtake deals to pull copper and cobalt away from Chinese-dominated chains. Beijing is doubling down on mines, refineries, and infrastructure after the pandemic, with its investment in Africa hitting the highest level in years. Commentators in their own media now ask a question we should have asked first. Can Africa win as the West and China scramble for minerals? A Pan-African answer must start from a simple truth. We are no longer a marginal theater. We are the core supplier of the minerals that make the 21st century economy possible. Roughly a third of known critical mineral reserves lie on the African soil. Yet most of the value created from those resources appears in Chinese, American, and European GDP numbers, not in African budgets, African industries, or African jobs. We still ship ore and import finished goods. We export wealth and import dependence. Trump and Putin's trip to China should therefore be read from Dakar to Dar es Salaam as a wake-up call. If Beijing is now the place where Washington and Moscow go to adjust the balance of power, then Africa must become the place where Africans decide the terms on which our resources, our markets, and our ports are used. That means regional bargaining for critical minerals, mandatory local processing, African stakes in strategic projects, and a clear doctrine of neutrality that serves African interests first. As long as African states negotiate alone, we will remain attractive territories in somebody else's grand strategy. The day we negotiate as blocs with a unified position on minerals, energy, and infrastructure, Trump's plane to Beijing and Putin's train to China will no longer be distant spectacles. They will be moves that must take into account and organize Africa, capable of saying yes, no, or not under these conditions. This is what these visits really mean, not that the world has become China's, but that Africa will pay the price of this new order unless Africans themselves start treating our continent as the strategic power it already is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashila. Thank you very much for that take on the editorial. You're talking about the assets that the African continent has, and it's actually in this system we notice that Africa is not a spectator. Indeed, it sits on the very assets that the world is competing right now for. We are talking about the gold, cobalt, copper, gas, oil, rare and arid lands, and what have you. So these are the financial collateral that the African continent needs to sit on, and they are not just commodities. So they need to really consider them like some financial backup in a way, Clarisse.
Absolutely, absolutely, Rita. And that is why we are on this platform to continue to provide the scope for such an expert analysis to help policy makers and other stakeholders across the African continent and beyond, to see how the world of multipolarity can be that world where there is respect of sovereignty, where there is mutuality. And on that note, we continue with our first round, and we are going to Mongolia. Let's meet Dr. Hari. Of course, she's an expert in interdisciplinary expert, meaning you know, and a bit of every aspect. So in your own perspective, Dr. Ari, what analysis can you give to the summit that we witnessed across between Russia, China, and the United States of America, those separate events, but then there is always something to learn from it, especially that the Putin and Xi emphasize on education, culture, and how these can be used to probably align with the new world of cooperation and interaction.
Yeah.
Dr. Ari, your mic is muted.
Thank you very much. I'm absolutely agreeing with my colleagues who's participating in this dialogue. And as a last person who's on the panel, they already talked many of the points that I wanted to mention. But I wanted to talk from the perspective of a developing country who is located between Russia and China, which is the two big leading countries, powers in the world, and also has a good relation with the United States. And I think many countries, especially African countries, has the same problems and same advantages as Mongolia, because Mongolia also preserve lots of minerals and natural resources. And from this date, we have also been selling our natural resources as cheaper to China and Russia, just like in Africa. But this trip to China is confirmed that the world is going to be a multi-polar, not a single polar. And Europe and America are starting to lose their control over the world, and they are no longer will dictate us the conditions how we should live or how we should make deals that is more profitable for them and less profitable for developing countries. And BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Agreement organization is expanding their impact all around the world, including South Asia and Africa and South America as well. And because of Iran war, most of the Muslim and Arabic countries are now more interested into BRICS alliance as well. And the big benefit that BRICS alliance gives to the other countries is the freedom from dollar control, freedom to develop, and freedom to be equal to other countries. So I think this multipolar regime that is going to be established, already started to establish in the world, will give a big opportunity for developing countries to be a really sovereign country, but not only on the paper, and to be a real economic player, not a provider. And I think in Africa, for African people, I would like to encourage them that it's your time is coming, and you have lots of opportunities, and this multipolar system will give you lots of advantages, and you have to believe in yourself, and you have to change your mentality from being a beggar or taker, just like Mongolia. We can do it, and we can be a player in this multipolar world. And in terms of Trump's trip, I'm absolutely agree with our colleagues today. And basically, there was 5 main points were discussed in his meeting. First is about the trade war, and it looks like they are giving up on the trade war, and they're willing to free all the all the sanctions that they were posing against China. And the next one was on a technological conflicts and sanctions between China and USA. He brought the 17 companies who are leading, and most of them more focused on the technology. And they finally admitted that they are depending on the chips and other technological elements that to support their economic power in the world. And the next point that they were discussing was the tariff limit, and America also backed up their position in this area. And the next one was they are pushing, and in other words, asking China not to be involved into Iran war by providing them weapons. And this problem, it's not a problem, it is a request, I think, in partially was satisfied. The next main point that they discussed was Taiwan, the issue about the Taiwan. And Chinese response was very, very harsh. They said that if you interact some way with this issue between China and Taiwan, then we will have a big problem, and it can lead to even a huge conflict like a war. And the Trump response was just smiling and calling him my good friend. So I'm absolutely agree with my colleagues that the trip to Trump, for Trump, it was a very, very useless, in a simple word. On the opposite side, Russia, China has been long relations, and they are eternal neighbors. And for them, they always have to be nice to your neighbor. It's very important, and they always support each other in many terms. And Russia gives them lots of oil, gas, and raw materials that the Chinese economy depends a lot. And on the other side, China supports Russia during this difficult time to keep strong and economically stable by buying all these goods, not paying attention to the sanctions demanding from European and American side. So their alliance already added many Southeast Asian countries, India, and some countries from different continents as well. And as you know, this is the biggest continent in the world. Eurasia is the biggest continent in the world, and also has the most population. So they are already agreed and already started to have a very significant actions to make this continent more stronger. And they are keeping a very high priority to bring more countries from Africa and from South America, and post-Soviet countries are mostly going into that alliance. So I think it's already clear that the multipolar world will be established, and for America, it's sooner you accept it and sooner you adjust your policy, it's better. And for Europe, it's of course they don't want to let the power go, but they have to accept it and admit it as well. And for other developing countries, it's a big chance for us to develop, to be really who you are, and to be a really sovereign country. So I think the world is going to the right direction.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Ari, for your take. You mentioned a lot of things on the strength of the African continent, and also the various agreements that were placed on desk by China, by USA, and put under Russia. Now, I would like to take this question to Mr. Hale. talking about the African power, how can the African middle powers really maintain a truly non-aligned strategic position while simultaneously navigating the defense ties with China and Russia alongside Western economic pressures?
Well, I think that's happening. I think that's occurring. I think that's what the Chinese want. Of course, we're dealing with, as I said, a continuing hangover of European colonialism. And of course, the French and others don't want that. But at this point, there's the potential, as Dr. Ari was saying, and others, that it doesn't really matter so much what the advanced so-called countries want. There is a change, a fundamental change in the world. And the system that we've lived under literally for 5 centuries is coming down. Now, the real question then is, will there be leaders in Africa who can put forward a strategy for collaboration? And I think what we're seeing from the Sahelian states, we're seeing a move in that direction. We're seeing a lot of discussion there, but we're also seeing a lot of interference, particularly from the British and the French in Nigeria and several other cases. But to get to the heart of this question, the interest in the world is for peace. And I just want to bring up, because I have to leave in a minute, a very important event this next week at the United Nations Security Council. China will be the president for this next term of the UN Security Council. And they're going to have a hearing on the Iran war coming up. And there's a proposal that's been put forward which goes toward this question of how do the smaller countries fit into this multipolar world. The former Prime Minister of Turkey, Davutoglu, has put forward an idea, which is that you would have the so-called medium-sized countries, Pakistan, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Turkey, as guarantors of the security for the Strait of Hormuz. And that this would be acceptable to Iran, it would be acceptable to Russia and China. The only question is whether the US would accept it. But I think this is the kind of thing we're going to see with some of the countries which in the past have been frozen out in this new multipolar order, have an opportunity to participate as significant players. And the same thing, of course, would be true for African countries. It's largely a question of defining how to work together. And I think this is the task of the BRICS. You know, there are a number of African countries that are heading into the BRICS or have applied for membership in the BRICS. And this is going to be the future. So instead of seeing the world from the standpoint of being the underdog, as Ahila was saying, the African countries have raw materials and, importantly, young people with hopes. And it's going to be the responsibility of leadership to bring these young people into positions where they can do something for the future as collaborators.
Thank you so much, dear Ali. Of course, we will watch to see if actually the US will actually align with that, and that is what the world is watching as well. And coming back to you, Thierry, from all that has been said, we had a lot of characteristics regarding the US position regarding the visits to China. But then it comes to mind that it was more of a transactional visit rather than a diplomatic visit that will bring resolve to crisis in the world, especially the US role in Iran, and of course the consequences of the closure or the crisis, especially along the line, along the Strait of Hormuz, is actually being felt by a whole lot of countries, including China. So now it brings us to ask this geostrategic question. From every indication, it was a transactional rather than strategic and diplomatic mission to bring resolve to this. So how can we probably interpret this ideology and see how to, bring forth points to probably correct it to avoid this from leading the world into the spiral of wars. We remember that when Iran and the USA did not actually compromise on the tables of talks, the next thing was an onslaught on the Iran, and now China and USA did not actually meet something reasonable. So how can we actually understand this philosophy, find a solution that will help to kill such political rhetoric that only brings about vulnerability along lines of international cooperation and relations?
Well, first of all, we need, in fact, to understand what are the real reason for which United States have been attacking Iran. And that is very far from the story of nuclear weapons. Actually, the Ayatollah was signing up a bill saying that it was not being Muslim, in fact, to develop nuclear weapons. So basically, if Trump was not trusting them, that is a very big problem, and we need to understand why he did it. I do believe, and this is a theory that I have been developing, and I think that I'm pretty close to what is the reality. I do believe that Trump was thinking about to make America great again, to control the source of energy in the world. He has been taking Venezuela. He wanted to take Greenland, which is very rich in minerals, in petrol, in gas, the same thing in Venezuela. And he was thinking, okay, I am going to attack Iran. They are going to want settlements because I am the big guys, the big shark in the pond. And unfortunately, it didn't happen that way. So basically, his deal was about, in fact, to take the control of Iran, but also to take the control of the South Corridor of the Belt and Road Initiative. The way that this is happening in Central Europe with Ukraine, because there was a channel that was supposed, in fact, to be developed to cross from China to Vienna, going through Kiev. So basically, by destabilizing those two countries, he would be able, in fact, to control the Belt and Road Initiative and to attack directly China regarding the economic hegemony that China tried to set up in the world. Because the deal of Belt and Road Initiative is to link Africa with South America and to gather all the natural resources necessary for the functioning of China. So now, what has been happening is that Iran has been developing retaliation, asymmetric retaliation, hitting on its neighbor. And therefore, what is happening? We have a contention in the Detroit of Hormuz, which become an opportunity for America. Where are the different poles of energy in the world? You have, of course, the Middle East, you have America and Canada, and you have Russia. Russia is under sanction. Therefore, to distribute the oil is kind of complex, and this is going through different hubs at the expense of Russia, that is obliged, in fact, to sell with a very big discount. Who is beneficiating of this contention of resources? United States. And if you look at the European Bruegel statistic fulfillments in energy, it can be GLN or oil, we see that Europeans right now are buying massively oil and gas from United States at a price that is uncompetitive to their economy. So basically, the deal that was on the table here is to control completely the energy first, and second of all, to control the China developments of the Belt and Road Initiative. So basically, the plan didn't go as it was planned. And now Trump doesn't understand and know how to do, in fact, to solve this problem. And actually, if you look at the psychological aspect of the situation, the new Ayatollah, which is the son of the previous one, has his entire family that has been destroyed. Do you think that this man is going to comply to the demand of United States? I don't think so. His wife has been killed. His daughter has been killed. His parents have been killed. His sister has been killed. Her husband, her niece. The guy is not going to comply. And he will go straight, in fact, to the confrontation. And actually, Donald Trump knows that if he's interfering on the military point of view, this is going to be a gigantic disaster, because Iran has been promising to use stronger weapons and to destroy completely the capacity of its neighbor to distribute energy. So basically, even if the Detroit of Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz will be opened, if the infrastructure are completely destroyed, we are going to face shortage of oil and gas during the next 10 years, because it would take about 10 years, in fact, to rebuild all the infrastructure necessary for the exploitation of those resources. And actually, this is linked to what is happening in the Strip of Gaza, because Gaza is adjacent to a field offshore that is called Gaza Marine. And if Israel is taking over the Strip of Gaza, they would be able, in fact, to own this oil and gas field offshore, and they would become number 4 exporter of GLN in the world. In the context of sanctions to Russia and Europe that do not want to buy the energy from Russia, this is positioning Israel on a very good, economically at a very high incentive. So basically, now Trump is completely trapped within the conflict of Iran, and to come out with a solution, I do believe that he needs to forget the pretext that he has been inventing regarding those nuclear weapons, and make sure that he is withdrawing of this region. And China, Russia needs, in fact, to motivate all the GCC states constituting the Middle East to come out with a security architecture that would include Iran in the way that they would develop, in fact, the economy of their region, despite, in fact, the different political views or the religion views. So if Trump is smart enough, he would be withdrawing and leave those guys, in fact, discussing with each other. And if he does not do that, then we are going to face major problem for the next 10 years.
To look how to solve this problem. Just been informed that Jason Ross just joined the conversation. He is director at La Roche Institute and is joining us from the United States of America. You're welcome to this informative and discursive program, Global Insight. Mr. Ross, welcoming you with a question. Of course, we're looking at the stakes of the visit of Russia, U.S. and Russian presidents to the People's Republic of China. So I will ask this question: how these visits are actually affecting the balance of power in a multipolar setting?
Oh, thank you for the invitation to be here. To address your question about the meetings in China, I think that the fact that both of these high-level meetings of Presidents Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in China over the very recent period, we got to look at that in context of some upcoming events as well, such as the APEC meeting in Shenzhen, I believe it's in Shenzhen, and the G20 meeting in Florida. These will be additional opportunities for discussions among those three nations, if not tripartite, at least bilateral discussions. I think that the biggest outcome that one might take from Trump's visit to Beijing is what didn't happen. There was no explosion of anger about tariffs. There was no announcement by Trump of using Taiwan as a bargaining chip. Instead, the two countries had a friendly meeting, and the deliverable coming out of it of a framework for discussions on trade and economic investment matters, I think helps to institutionalize a way for the leaders of the two countries, the political leadership of the two countries, to stay in communication about how to manage their relationship and hopefully find more ways of cooperating for the mutual benefit. I think the visit of President Putin of Russia goes to underscore how deep is the strategic relationship between China and Russia. This is a very strong grouping. The two nations are supporting each other, and they stand united in their support for the UN Charter. Now, one way that's coming up this coming week is that on Tuesday, May 26th, China, which is just finishing its 1-month term as president of the Security Council, is holding an event, a discussion at the Security Council on the UN Charter and its relevance for today. What are the challenges to the UN Charter? Well, both China and Russia have been very explicit, as has Araghchi from the foreign minister of Iran, saying that bullying, unilateral actions, essentially the actions of the United States or Anglo-American NATO more broadly, are putting an end to the system of international law that the UN Charter has enshrined for over 75 years. So I think that that meeting coming up in New York next Tuesday, along with the meeting on Thursday, May 28th, where Wang Yi will be hosting an event for the Global Friends of Global Governance. This is one of the initiatives of the Xi Jinping administration to create new fora for discussion, in this case, about what a stable and development-oriented type of global governance could be like. So that's the context I would put those two visits in.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Ross. Thank you very much, Mr. Ross, for that take. But I would like you to stay with me again. You talked of the topic of Taiwan, the Middle East being tabled by Donald Trump and President Xi. So how, with Trump reportedly considering treating arms sales to Taiwan as a negotiating chip, how are Chinese strategists viewing this U.S. commitment to the Indo-Pacific in light of Washington's stretched global resources?
Well, I think that what you put at the end there is the key thing to look at it. The U.S. is stretched. The attack led by Israel and the United States against Iran has exhausted the U.S. military. Not completely. Obviously, it still has very important capabilities. But the war has not been going in the United States' favor. The asymmetric nature of it, the fact that it's so far away, all of this has combined, along with the provision of interceptor missiles to Israel, to really draw down U.S. stocks. So in one sense, the U.S. doesn't have much of a choice when it comes to what they call the Indo-Pacific. There simply aren't that many weapons available. And this is what the acting Secretary of the Navy, Hung Cao, told the U.S. Senate on Thursday. He said, we're not considering this $14 billion arms sale package to Taiwan right now because we need to make sure we have enough weapons for epic fury. Now, President Trump himself had noted that the $14 billion arms sale could be a negotiating piece with China, and it's possible that it was used that way. In this case, it's quite plausible that the United States is seeing less effectiveness in trying to provide weapons to Taiwan and so forth, compared to the importance of having a good relationship with China. So I think that this is something that Trump has, he's been cautious on. He has, in my view, made good moves to not escalate the situation with Taiwan.
Very much.
Well, is it possible for me to interfere regarding in fact, the problem of Taiwan between the United States and China? Because, in fact, this is not very much Taiwan that is the real problem. The real problem in this story is TSMC. TSMC is a company that has a very unique technology allowing to print transistor with a precision of 2 nanometers. United States, 4 or 5 years ago, have been asking for TSMC to build 2 facilities in Arizona to make sure that we'll be having a backup in case of there was a conflict between China and Taiwan. But the problem of this technology is the following. It's not very much a transfer of technology that is on the table. It's an IP problem because the condition in which they are developing, the environmental condition in which they are developing in fact, technology in Arizona are completely different of the environment in Taiwan. So basically, and on top of it, this is about temperature, this is about the quality of water and so on, but also there is an IP problem regarding, in fact, the knowledge of people to develop those processors, because those kind of facilities, it's extremely complex on the setup point of view, and you need, first of all, to train the people, but also to make sure that they have 10 to 20 years experience before to come out with these technologies. And actually, they have been bringing about 1,000 people coming from Taiwan into Arizona, but since they have been working there, it has been 2 years, they cannot come out with the same kind of setup to make sure that they can build the equivalence processor. So basically, TSMC is working for NVIDIA. And NVIDIA has a ban to distribute their product, and especially the high-end processor, the Blackwells, to China. But China has all the rare earths and the process to filter out the ground to come out with the concentration necessary of rare earths to build, in fact, those processors. So in this equation, everybody is holding everybody. China has the technology to filter out, in fact, the rare earths. Those rare earths are necessary to build the processors. China needs those processors, in fact, to develop their AI centers, and the United States is just making the arbitration out of it. And I do believe that it's out of question on each side to raise, in fact, the stake at the point that there will be a conflict. Because if the island is destroyed and the people, because of war, are killed, they will be losing, in fact, the capacity of development of their technology. So basically, Xi Jinping and Donald Trump knows about that, and it's out of question they will go at the stake, in fact, to trigger a conflict. So selling weapons to Taiwan is a nonsense, because China will never attack straightforward Taiwan due to the risk this would be developing in regard of the destruction of this technology.
Yeah, as well as, if I may, as well as the cultural risk. I mean, China does not want a military solution to this issue. They don't want to create generations of enmity by resolving it militarily.
We're going to dwell more on that topic, which is very imperative. This just shows how important the stakes of this visit were, Rita, and how countries are actually reshaping or going back to the drawing board. And it brings us back to have the African perspective with you, Dr. Ashil Eki. We have listened keenly to the editorial you were presented, but then we ask this question: what are the practical strategies? As we are talking now in Africa, there's some sort of political, I don't know if I should say a political earthquake in Senegal, and we see how Africa's political rhetoric is actually derailing the continent from the agenda of international affairs. So how can we actually resolve this very grave problem that is probably retarding the continent from having a great agenda that can suffice the complex states of international cooperation, of strategic involvement with people? We are now seeing how countries, the US, China, and Russia, they are actually bringing policies that will not undermine the future, especially in line with economic development. But then there's some sort of a political quagmire across Africa. How can we navigate this to have real strategies for diplomacy? Your mic is muted, sir. Please.
Yes. Very good question, Clarisse. And I have 5 points that I want to raise here to provide, ideas or solutions as to what we need to do. I know what happened in Senegal yesterday it's earth-shaking in Africa. The president of Senegal, who is of the same party with the prime minister, he fired the prime minister yesterday, and is driving the whole country crazy right now. And knowing that they're both from the same party, they went through the same, challenges and difficulties, to get to power, and to see how they're splitting, in daylight, it's driving the whole continent crazy. We don't really understand what's happening there, but that's a topic that we're going to discuss later. Anyway, African countries can use, from a standpoint of view, the minerals are the real power, only if they stop negotiating alone and start acting like a coordinated supplier of rules of their own. And in order for them to be able to do that, the first thing they have to negotiate as a bloc, just like we mentioned earlier, not as an isolated state, right? So, research, what we see, that research on critical minerals, is very clear. When resource-rich states or countries bargain individually with big powers, they accept tougher clauses and weaker obligations on local value addition. Regional coordination shift the baseline, right? So so practical steps will be, for example, to turn these regional economic organizations, ECOWAS, SADC, EAC, and so on, into mineral hubs that can adopt common positions, for example, on taxes, on royalties, and also, all kind of stuff like local contents and export rules as well. And they can also use AFSAC, to treat critical minerals as a strategic sector, which with the coordinated export policies and shared infrastructures like rail, ports, power, and place and things like that. For example, instead of the DRC, DRC, Zambia, and Angola each negotiating separately with the US, or Chinese buyers, a cobalt belt platforms, for example, could set the minimum rules on processing, pricing formulas, and rail access. That would be phenomenal. That would give them the leverage that they need in order for them to be able to negotiate, on a better footing. And the second point is use Africa Mining Vision as a binding standard, right? So the Africa Mining Vision already exists as a continental framework to turn mining into broad-based development, with a stronger fiscal regime, better contact and local linkages. For example, the African Union or the African Union's African Minerals Governance Framework, and other, such, they are designed to monitor implementation and push countries away from pure raw oil exports, for example. And so the third point would be to tie every deal to value addition in infrastructure, and that would be, for example, analysts of Africa's critical minerals have insisted for a long time that partnerships must bundle mines plus processing plus infrastructure plus skills instead of just exporting oil. So in practice, what would that mean? We could require that a rising share of production be processed locally or regionally. That could be something that we can, require for any multinational deal. We can make big off-take deals conditional on investments in rails, ports, power, and training, in training centers that also serve as sectors, not only the mine, right? And another avenue is to explore the use of PPPs, not just for extraction, but also for regional industrial parks that are focused on batteries, components, and clean energy equipment. The fourth point that I want to outline also is, build bargaining power, right? That is something that Africa has not been able to do. And that would be important for data, when it comes to data, to laws and capacity, right? So those are, areas that I think that could be very important, because without good geological data and contract expertise, governments always negotiate from weakness, right? So, we've seen that many studies have highlighted this as a central problem in the continent. And the fifth point is to align mineral strategy with workers, communities, and climate. We've seen that trade unions and civil society platforms in Africa stress that critical minerals strategies must include, labor rights, community consent, and environmental standards. Otherwise, they reproduce the oil extraction models that we don't want that happening anymore. So that all this means that we have to embed score standard, not just transition plans, but human rights due diligence and also other strategies into mining regimes and supply chain agreements. Using the green mineral strategies to ensure local communities get a visible share of benefits and protection from environmental damages. So these are all proposals that I'm suggesting to allow the continent to be able to get together and to be able to negotiate in an equal footing, because like I said earlier in my editorial, when those countries are meeting, Africa is on the menu, definitely. And if we don't put together those strategies, implement them effectively and speak in one voice, man, it's going to be a disaster for the continent in a few years. And we already see what is happening in the multipolar situation right now, as the United States, doesn't feel comfortable in this, arena anymore, in the United Nations frameworks anymore. They want to subtract themselves to be able to, acquire more, control over mining resources over the continent and other areas in the world, South America, Middle East, because, United States feels that, as the Chinese president mentioned earlier during I think it was the first speech when Trump arrived in China, he mentioned the theory of Thucydides, right? So he talked about that theory. He hopes that it's not going to happen. And I want to say, what is the theory of Thucydides? Thucydides is a historian, a Greek historian who lived 400 years before Christ, and who theorized that when a rising power, threatens an existing power, 12 times out of 16, there is a war that happens, right? So, and he hopes that they're not going to get to war between the United States and China. So that's the idea. So, so that's where we are today.
I have a question for you, actually, Achilles. Don't you think that the things that Africans need to do is to come out with an African version of the COMEX First, and second, I do believe that the states in Africa need, in fact, to renegotiate their contract with the foreign companies that are exploiting their mine and come out also with a refinancing of their debt, in fact, to address the exploitation of this mine. And actually, in fact, China through the NDB, meaning the new development banks, can in fact counterpart the debt that they have been contracting to the IFM. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. I think the idea is, like I mentioned, Africa is not in a position to negotiate, to its own benefits right now. It's just absorbing whatever, proposal they're getting or deal that they be imposed on the continent right now. They're not able to negotiate, so they have to unite. They have to find a way to have the same vision and then implement that vision the same way across the board, because that's the only leverage we have, short of having nuclear weapons and other, military, technology or that could allow us to be able to, to impose our will on other partners. But that's the leverage that we have, and so far we haven't been able to do that. And those colonizers are making sure that that doesn't happen, right? That they want to make sure that Africa is well divided, and every time there is a semblance of unity, there's always some kind of infighting, some kind of war that starts, and then the United States and France and all these countries, they know how to manage that. They know how to manage that chaos. It's a coordinated chaos that is well managed to not allow the continent to develop. And every time there is semblance of development, there is some guerrilla, some war, some internal fighting that starts, and all that are financed by external forces, as we know. So we have to be able to unite, to be able to understand what is happening and put strategies to fight against all these Western strategies, and then allow us, to have the breathing room, the breathing space to strategize and implement that strategy effectively across the board in the continent.
Very imperative. Okay, Harry, you can go. I was coming to you. You can go ahead, please.
Okay. World is developing too fast, especially China. And for African countries,
France se réjouit de l'échec militaire des Russes au Nord-Mali.
To become a strategic player in the minerals area. What I meant is there's already whoever controls the energy controls the world. That's why all these wars are going on and all this stuff. But we have to remember that time is very limited for Africa. What I meant that time is limited for Africa is there's already the hydrogenic engine, and hydrogenic energy is on the way. Russia already created it, China created it, Japan has it, and even North Korea has that engine that brings the energy from the water. So if that spreads all around the world, there's no need for all this lithium, cobalt, and all the minerals that Africa holds right now. And there's a very small window of time, for Africa to unite and do what you just mentioned, and to become a strategic player and to profit the country. Otherwise, if that time is gone, then it's gone.
It's gone indeed. Let me stay with you, Dr. Ari. Let's look a little at the economic leverage and resource control, and also the global south. As Washington is leveraging economic statecraft globally, how is China using this manufacturing and technological dominance to bind the global south tighter to its own geopolitical orbit? As in, is this global south moving towards a unified multipolar stance, or is it becoming a battleground for renewed US, China, and Russia competition?
I'm sorry, your voice was very breaking, and could you please repeat the question?
In trying to understand actually the position of China in this economic leverage and resource control, is the global south moving Is the global south moving towards a unified multipolar stance, or is it becoming a battleground for renewed US, China, and Russia competition?
Well, China, of course, not really trying to compete with anybody. Because he already knows his power, and now it's already the richest country, and it's advanced in technology. But he wants the stability. So in order to be stable, there shouldn't be a war going on here and there, and the neighbors or the main buyer gets into a conflict. So the one thing that I really admire and appreciate in Chinese policy is that they are really considering the green policy to be the main head of their policy, because China seems like the only country that fully understands the impact of the carbon, how do you say it, the ecological impact on the carbon on the ecological impact, and the world warming and the climate change issues. Because if the climate change issue really hits the limit, then we're all going to be vanished. And China is really looking forward to that, and preparing, trying to change the perspective of treating environment and the production and the human living lifestyle to adapt it to a green lifestyle. That is very good in the Chinese policy. And another good point that China has, it's good in one way, but bad in the other way, of course. China has a very strict controlling system, like a very direct. If the decision is made, it's implemented right away. But in our other countries, the decision is made and have to go through many negotiations, discussions, implementing the law and this and that, and it wastes a lot of time. But in China, if decision is made, it right away goes to implementation. And you can see it from the electronic cars. It's really leading in the world. And because their political system, the decision-making system is so fast and so impactful, they can change it to a heterogenic system very fast as well. And then many markets and many economics will be impacted on that decision and the process. I'm sorry, it's already 1 a.m. in Mongolia, so my brain is functioning very, very slow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. What I'm saying is that America, since all this war, all these conflicts are started from the energy control, every country in every continent should be striving to the green energies, and the conflict will be more or less than we think. And for Africa, again, it's a very window and a gap time, so we really get to come together and solve the issue and become a strategic player in this area. And this is another point that you have to address and limit, seeing in that mind that the world is going to that direction, in the green direction and hydrogenic direction, and adapt to that. And for developing countries like ours, Mongolia or Africa, we are going after. We are not trying to see further, and we are trying. Our policies and our actions are more focused on putting the fire down. But we should be more working and focusing that what will be happening in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 15 years' time, and adjust our policy and adjust our strategy fitting to that vision. Then we can really become a player in the world.
Rita, thank you so much, of course, and this is where we see how we can look for a common ground among competing powers. Coming back to you, Jason, we're looking at how the partnership deepening is actually providing a platform to, curtail the adverse effect of competing global powers. Months ago, we saw the United States of America in some sort of an economic war with China, and on the 14th to the 15th the 13th to the 14th of May, we saw the leadership of the USA in China trying to negotiate and see how they can turn things around to for some very strategic reasons. So what is the common ground for solving these competing global powers to actually give also importance to diplomacy at the level of people to also ensure sustainability in relationship, intercultural relationships that will also lead to some economic buoyancy and diplomacy at the people-to-people level?
Well, I think that cooperation on economic projects, on people-to-people exchanges, these are all very important for the two countries to better understand the benefits that accrue to both by cooperating rather than competing. I think the biggest thing standing in the way is the United States policy. The United States must change its policy. Right now, it's pursuing a counterproductive approach of seeing itself, perhaps along with England, in directing NATO and maintaining a sense of hegemony over the world. This results in enormous expenditures for the military instead of on infrastructure, where China has invested billions and trillions into infrastructure, especially rail. The U.S. has wasted an enormous amount of money on military expenditures to try to maintain a position in the world through power over others, instead of the power to do something good, the power to grow and have a productive economy. So I think that the avenues that you mentioned, such as people-to-people exchanges, these are the kinds of things that help improve the dialogue process in the United States and help Americans get a better sense that there are other countries in the world and that it's important to know about them and their interests. Because if you look politics aside, the opportunities are absolutely enormous. One big one would be space cooperation. NASA has had wonderful successes in space. China has had recently wonderful successes in space. Unfortunately, there is very little cooperation between the two countries in space and space science. That would be one very immediate opportunity to open up new collaboration, along with all of the other things. One aspect of this would be cooperation in third countries. So, for example, the Congo River has an enormous flow of water, and not far from its mouth, there is a very significant and rapid elevation change that makes a wonderful opportunity for the Grand Inga hydropower project. This would be an enormously expensive project. And I was speaking with a former head of the World Bank at an event. He wasn't in office at the time, about this, and he said the only way that he thinks that could happen would be if the United States and China cooperated on it. So I think that that's another avenue for U.S.-China cooperation, is joint efforts for projects in third countries, instead of it being competition between the Belt and Road is bad, so the U.S. should do something else, except the U.S. doesn't really offer that much. If there was collaboration, there would be more choices for countries around the world.
Staying with you, Mr. Jason, staying with you to understand this economic integration among states. Let's look at the success of the economic integration between China and African states. You mentioned DR Congo. We know China successfully implemented a zero tariff treatment for numerous African nations. Now, when we look at this economic integration, to what extent does it foster mutual development versus creating an asymmetric dependency?
I think that if one examines, for example, the types of investment and the types of debt involved in African projects and you contrast Western financial institutions with Chinese ones, the numbers tell a story. The story is that Western investment is more oriented towards extraction of resources. Chinese investment is comparatively much more weighted towards local production, local manufacturing, setting up businesses to operate in Africa, to produce goods for sale in Africa or around the world. The FOCAC meetings, the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, these occur every few years. And generally at them, there are large announcements of projects. China has changed its approach. Well, China and Africa through the FOCAC have been changing their approach recently to focus less on extremely large projects and more on smaller business opportunities and things like this. So I think that when Western think tanks, geopolitical think tanks, say that China is trying to capture Africa in a debt trap through Belt and Road financing, it's simply not true. It's simply not true. If you look at where the debt is owed, the terms of the debt, most of this is owed to financial institutions, and China has not insisted on payment or extracting payment when a country hasn't really been able to make it happen. Instead, China often forgives loans, especially zero-interest loans. So I think that China has the better approach towards Africa, which is that this is the continent that is going to see the most growth in population and economy in the world over the next generation or two. And China recognizes that this is a great partner to have. And they're investing more in directions that allow a long-term partnership. And I think the U.S. should take a lesson from China and offer more incentives and financing for American businesses to get more involved in projects.
Is that with the cohesive policies sometimes regarding U.S.-Africa position in this juncture becomes very problematic. Rita, MOTO, just to remind our viewers that this is Global Insight, where we get to discuss global affairs and analyze and, of course, make recommendations on what the world can look like in the future, taking history to actually rewrite the events of today and how it can shape a world that will be mutual, will define sovereignty in all totality. And that is why we are here today, ladies and gentlemen, looking not just at the stakes of the visits by Russian President Vladimir Putin between China and the Russian Federation, not just the stakes between China and the United States of America, but also seeing how their meeting will affect the trajectory of other blocks across the globe, especially the global south, the BRICS, the global north, and of course, what strategies can we put forward to be able to bring to some sort of a point of compromise where conflicting powers can actually find a reason to cooperate, like one pundit will put it, an alternative idea, an alternative pattern, an alternative model is not actually coming to downgrade the existing roles, but also to see how this new roles with the new realities of society can work together for the betterment of mankind and also solidifying globalization and the concept of international cooperation. Rita?
Certainly, Clarisse. And indeed, we are watching how these superpowers are renegotiating a relationship of deep interdependence, like President Xi Jinping precised during these two visits. He was not and he was not belabeling on a dominance relationship, but
Absolutely.
He was on a win-win.
On a win-win.
Yeah, he was on a win-win and an interdependence, not a domination. So we are looking at all of this and also trying to see how for Africa that renegotiation is going to reshape the rules of the global game.
Absolutely, renegotiating the rules of the global game, Africa learning globally and applying locally. There is need for the African continent, like Thierry and the other guests just highlighted. There is need to be intentional about the strategy that is put on the table to also have Africa's voice on the agenda. I think it's time for us to have strict recommendations from a panel of experts, and of course, as we're almost culminating with this discursive program, what is the way forward? A declaration has been signed between the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China. Trump's visit was problematic, and then what would be the next step that he would take? Just to note that when we talk Russia and China, we're looking at 25 years of strategic partnership. We are looking at 30 years of mutual cooperation between two countries that decided to keep the differences aside and come together to see how they can enhance the diplomatic position of their respective nations. And I think we'll take this last round, starting with Thierry Laurent, having recommendations, having discussed all the stakes are involved. I know we cannot actually talk about everything, but it's imperative that the key stakes have been highlighted, and how this is shaping the world of international relations, and how can we align with this while keeping international law intact.
Well, I do believe that this is not pretty much a question of diplomacy that we have to deal with. It is a monetary system that we need, in fact, to establish in the way that the relationship between countries will be more balanced. We are dealing with two presidents, President Putin and President Xi, that are very mature. They understand, in fact, a civilizational aspect of the humanity. And we have, on the other side, President Trump, representing the United States, that could not afford the way that they have been living on the expense of the entire planet. They have been able, in fact, to impose their way of living, and we have been supporting it through their debt because of the dollar since, in fact, the end of the Second World War. Today, the United States cannot afford, in fact, their standard of living because they are broken, totally broken, on the state point of view, on the population point of view, on the private equity point of view, on every financial aspect that is structuring, in fact, this country. And today they need to understand that they need to cooperate with everybody else instead of making sure they will be dominating through the vector that they have been putting together. China and Russia have been working on a system that is called M-Bridge, that is linked to a currency that is supposed to be the unit. It's a package, a bucket of different currency with a backup in gold representing 40% of those buckets. The only problem that I see here is that there is not enough dynamic that is set up within the BRICS to bring a massive adoption of this mechanism. And I do believe that the United States needs, in fact, to participate to this platform in the way that relationship between countries to trade commodities will be more balanced. And until this is not done, we will continue, in fact, to see this big fight to support, in fact, the standard of living of United States. So the attack on Iran that has been perpetrated by Israel and United States was, in fact, an attack on the BRICS and on the unicity of the BRICS. If you look at the behavior of the UAE right now, who want, in fact, to split out of the OPEC, this is the symbol of the zizanie that Trump has been putting together against the
Unfortunately, yeah, we are unable to connect with you, Terry.
has been due to
Okay, he's back.
and
He's back. Yeah.
BRICS and Africa to discuss, in fact, the adoption of the transactional mechanism. If they manage to, then we would solve, in fact, any diplomatic issue.
We seem to be losing
Terry.
Terry. Network very breaky, very shaky. So let's get to you, Dr. Ashio. Can we have your last take on the whole panel discussion? And we've had a couple of advice, a couple of proposals that have been put forward by you and the other members of the panel on how the African countries themselves need to really collaborate in order to implement certain decisions that are being taken, and not just having to draft decisions and let them still lie down, like having to copy from the best. China at the moment, like Dr. Ari said, it's a country that does implementation. So how can we look at all of these and look at the way forward for most of these developing countries, African middle countries and African countries particularly? How can they like forge ahead and work by implementation and not just drafting of agreements and accords?
Well, implementation is important, but strategically we have to think first before we implement what we have to, because if otherwise it's really, what are we implementing? How are we implementing it? For what results? So these are things that happen when there's a strategy that's been put together very strongly, as I said earlier. The first thing is first we have to, Africa has to stop being the arena where others, come to play and start acting as as a coordinated power with its own rules and priorities and red lines. We don't have that set up yet. So once we have that, then people are going to respect us. And the first thing is to treat multipolarity as an opportunity, not a religion, right? So the multipolarity situation, the multipolar world is an opportunity for Africa that they can leverage, to put together their own strategy and make sure that they have, they can use that leverage to help them, see the vision, put the strategy in place, and help them implement it as well. So multipolarity is a good thing for the continent, so that it can get out of the situation it is right now. Second, we have to build a real economic power. We have to integrate, and then create value addition, to the resources that we have. These are important things that we need to put together, because having those resources are great, but people are using them to our disadvantage. And if that continues, we're still going to be in the same position for 20, for 30, for 50 years for 50 years. And that's not what we want to do. That's not what we want to do. And Africa has to use minerals minerals and energy as strategic bargaining chips. Very important here. As all the continents or all the superpowers, they need those minerals. So how can they leverage that, in order for them to, to put forth their own agenda and then take the best, benefit more from those resources for the population, for the continent, from the youth, from the economic power that Africa is going to become in the next few years. And especially the population growth that we're going to see. We talk about 2.5 billion Africans in the next in the next 50 years or something like that. So this is huge. So we have to strategize ahead of time before things happen. And then we have to invest in people, knowledge, and digital sovereignty. These are critical areas that we all know are going to be the areas that we need to invest more into, so that the continent could be able to meet its own goals, meet its objectives, and then be respected around the world, and then have its own voice on every matter that that we have on this planet. So these are the 5 solutions that I'm proposing. I think if we go through if we implement those, that Africa is going to be in a good shape.
If I should add to this, that while thinking about digital sovereignty, investing in people, it is also imperative for Africa to have a political agenda that will align with Agenda 2063, its developmental agenda, and not a political agenda that serves the interest of a few. Coming to you, Dr. Aria, you talked so much about the position of China, and of course, while we were putting this question on the table, we were also asking if China is trying to position itself as some sort of a global place. And from the analysis that we heard from you and other guests, we can say that was not actually a categorical statement. So now let's try to assess China's pursuit of a multipolar order. Do you see it as some sort of a position that seeks to cement ties rather than a position that will cause some sort of turbulence along lines of diplomacy? We are looking at how the discussion with Donald Trump did not yield something substantial, and now it's just cool. But we know how cohesive Donald Trump can be when it feels like he has been in some sort of a diplomatic defeat. He becomes very cohesive, making statements like, oh, he's going to wipe out the population of Iran, going to Venezuela, taking out a democratically elected leader. So now let's look at China's position of a pursuit in this multipolar setting. If there's something that we need to learn from MOTO going further in this, era of win-win relationship and cooperation. Mm-hmm. Your mic is muted, Doctor.
I'm sorry. Sometimes I really do think that Trump is really working for Russia, because all his policies and all his actions are actually benefiting Russia. And he's making America look more like a bully country, and he's making more opportunities for Russia by starting the Iran war. He totally supported Russian economy. Even some European countries in secret make some deal under the table with Russia, not telling anybody, but we are going to buy some oil and gas from you guys, and we are not going to really support the Ukraine, and we are we okay kind of deals. So, and also it's pushing the Muslim countries, like Arabic countries, who were in the middle, that supporting going to supporting Western side or going to a BRIC side, and they, I think, already making their mind up and following the BRIC side. So it makes the U.S. and European countries kind of losing their power and control over many things in terms of economy, in terms of policy, and stuff like that. Multipolar world has been initiated by Russia and China, because they were so tired of pushed by some European and countries and America, and letting them to tell what to do and what not to do, and to be free in terms of development and in terms of economy, in terms of using their currency as a valuable in the world. So that's why they actually initiated this idea, especially Russia. And they are the one who, promoting this idea, and they convinced China, and they convinced India, and they are more convincing many countries. And although the propaganda tries to make Russia a bully guy, but in the reality or in many sense, the America itself was the bully guy who was being,
Actually,
so China, of course, definitely supporting the multipolar policy in Russia as well. If you compare Russia and China in terms of how they treat their cooperating partners, there's a very different picture. And I'm not the Chinese at all, and we are in between Russia and China, and we can experience it in our skin every day, how Russia treats Mongolia and how China treats Mongolia. So China's approach is more soft and more cooperative and more further looking, and they provides many opportunities to cooperating countries, and they really don't push forward and get involved unless that country involves into their policy and do something wrong against them. Let me put you in one simple example. Mongolia is called as an oasis in Asia, a democratic oasis in Asia, because we are so democratic and yet located between two very not really democratic countries, and but they still accept us and they still cooperate with us in a very peaceful manner. And if you look at the big picture, who else is providing in the world the cheapest money? In other words, the cheapest loans. Some of them with no interest, some of them with the lowest interest, in providing the opportunity for countries to develop itself, to create more infrastructure, to invest more in education, to invest more in the digital and exchange, and they are not really acting like a guy that I give you this, you have to do it for me this. They just want to cooperate and mutually develop and live peacefully. On the other side, if you look at the Russian policy and their action, all is more like losing. Russia was the country who was striving to keep their power among the socialist countries after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And in a way, they acted very aggressively, but in a way, they were trying to protect themselves. So it's very understandable. If you go back many years to when the democracy started in Russia, we can explain and why the Ukrainian war started, why their situation came to this situation right today. But one policy that Russia promotes a lot throughout the world that I really like is the multipolar policy. They really do believe that no country should intervene into internal issues of other country. In other words, they have to respect their sovereignty. And if you're cooperating with the country, the cooperation has to be in an equal level and in a good manner, and it should not be that one country wins, the other country loses. So in terms of that, they are in the same position, win-win, multipolar world. So I think again, it's a very good direction in the world. If you add to that direction the green policies, the anti-climate change policies and anti-climate change economy, then we could live peacefully and friendly coexist in the world. And let me add you one little detail. Please don't take that I'm talking about my country as a hire, but the policy that China implementing is go back to a policy that implemented during the Mongol Empire, Genghis Khan policy. That policy was to respect everybody, and in the same time develop in the same develop in every term in the same level. This was the world propaganda or the countries explain it in a different way, but we try to we know that we tried to make a first globalization in the world, and we were trying to create a peaceful world and during that time. In other words, the Mongolians. So as a evidence, during that 400 years when the Mongol Empire ruled the world, there was no war, but free trade, diplomacy, and taxes were the lowest, and the system of communication was developed, and the trade was free. Nobody controlled anybody. Through they called the Silk Road. So the same policy and same philosophy is inside the current Chinese policy. So in other words, in a soft way, coexist, but many countries will depend on you, but not in an aggressive way. That's the policy of China currently. And I think I don't see any bad thing in that, but I'm really glad that they're giving the opportunity for other countries to develop as well. Not like take. It's a win-win. So as a neighboring country and a developing country, this person, I really do support this idea. And many countries should, I think.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Ari. Thank you for enlightening us even about your country, Mongolia. And thank you again in a special way for your presence on this platform. We should remind that it's 1 a.m. over there in Mongolia, while here it's past 6 p.m. in Cameroon. Now, I'd like to end up... Thank you for the sacrifice. I'd like to end up with Mr. Jason Ross. We are looking now at China, who is standing at the center of today's discussion, and it was we are all aware that China is going to become the next president of the UN Security Council, and we look at how the country is hitting hard on the country's strategic condemnation of unilateral actions in the Middle East and in Taiwan and in the global South. So. How can you place this upcoming presidential role of China in the face of all this insecurity across the globe?
Well, I think that China is already playing a expanded role diplomatically in the Southwest Asian region, within the Middle East. It was just a few years ago, for example, that China had helped broker a rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. This is maybe 5-6 years ago, which seemed like a surprising thing to be able to achieve, but through their diplomacy, they did. The fact that China is able to invest as much as it is into development, into infrastructure, into fostering business relations and so forth, this is an enormous asset that it has, and that it allows it to play a constructive role in the world. To give just one example from the region, Ahmet Davutoglu, the former prime minister and before that former foreign minister of Turkey, he put out a proposal for 4 nations, Turkey, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Malaysia, to be involved in resolving the Hormuz Strait issue. He said those 4 countries could temporarily take control of the situation. This would free up discussion between Iran and the United States. And he put this in the context of addressing everything together: Iran's nuclear program, a regional peace and development framework, a solution for actually achieving Palestinian statehood. To that proposal, Helga Tsepp-LaRouche added last week the LaRouche Oasis Plan, which calls for an approach to peace in that region starting from economic development. Not saying, well, we have to have a political solution, then we will get to the development. No, development, economic interdependency, growth, this is the way to achieve peace in situations where it seems otherwise impossible. So I think what China may be hoping to do in the events this coming week, the high-level meeting at the UN Security Council on Tuesday on the UN Charter and what multipolarity looks like in today's world, the fight against unilateralism, and then on Thursday, the meeting of the Global Governance Initiative. I think that this provides an ongoing framework for discussion among diplomats and therefore among all the countries of the world about what kind of security architecture, what kind of development architecture, what form will international relations take in the future. And it's very desperately needed. The US really needs to move in that direction as well, instead of trying to maintain its primacy by being above others. It's a dead-end road, and the U.S. is running into that cul-de-sac right now.
Actually, bringing some sort of a questionable, conclusion of how the U.S. Image and reputation is seen globally because of politicians' rhetoric or maneuvering. That makes it very questionable. And from all you've said, Jason Ross, we can say that multilateral institutions actually have a huge task to play to ensure that multilateral engagement and multipolarity, or even the definition of new definition of sovereignty actually materializes. It doesn't end on papers. And of course, while Thierry was talking, he got interrupted. So we'll give you 1 minute to conclude your statement as we continue to highlight that today's program emphasizes on some keywords, among others like power, partnership, and of course how the new global balance between major countries when we start seeing such strategic meetings. Thierry, please, 1 minute to conclude.
Well, I don't know so basically, if you want to address the balance of the world, I do believe that United States and its politicians need to distinguish themselves of the influence of the APAC. Because if we are looking at the relationship that United States has with Israel, this is extremely toxic. Because we have somebody at the heads of Israel right now that is confusing its judicial situation with the state of Israel. And that is the reason why today we are facing such a turmoil, and that is putting the world in a situation extremely critical. So I do believe that this is the next economic crisis that is brewing in the pot, and that is going to explode to our face at the beginning of October or November, that is going to certainly wipe out certain numbers of very powerful institutions. And this might be a good way for the US population, American people, to realize who has been bringing them to the edge of collapse. Until the American people are not realizing where is the real problem, you can be sure that their politicians will continue, in fact, to meddle around the countryside and put a lot of instability in the world. As soon as the United States will be collapsing on the financial point of view, perhaps they will learn from their mistake and they will stop, in fact, to reignite their system in the way that they will continue on the same way. We have been facing the crisis of 2001, which was like an internet technology crisis, and then a financial crisis in 2008. But today we are facing a major crisis that is the merge of 2001, 2008, the crisis of what Egypt has been facing in 1956, and with infrastructure sourcing energy that has been destroyed, which was not the case in 1956. So basically, this convergence of crises are such that the United States is going to the recognition of their own problem. Until this is not happening, we will go on and on and on and on, and this will be continuing on the same trend. So basically, let's wish that at a point in time, those people will realize what is their real problem. Living on the expense of the entire planet is not the way to go, and what they need to do is to start to realize that cooperation will be the only way, in fact, to stabilize the fate of humanity.
All right. Thank you very much, Thierry, for your contribution. Thank you to the whole panel. This is where we actually call it
Of course, we are culminating, and
we're going to be culminating at
Yes.
this point. After 2 hours, 30 minutes of panel discussion, it was really an interesting session with you, Thierry Laurent. You were joining us from France, and you are a serial entrepreneur, executive advisor, and geopolitologist. Thank you very much. Equally, over there in Mongolia, Dr. Ari, Dr. Ari is an interdisciplinary expert, and indeed we really appreciated your interventions on this platform this night over there for you. Thank you very much. Equally, Jason Ross. Jason Ross joining us from the United States. He is the director of LaRouche organization, and we are informed that you'll be having sessions of meetings equally with this organization, of course, to foster prosperous discussions for the globe. Thank you, Jason Ross. And I end with you, Dr. Achilleke. You're a banker and a corporate finance expert from Cameroon and the USA, joining us from the USA this afternoon. And Clarisse WIYDORVEN, it was an interesting session.
absolutely.
Together, it was a pleasure to co-host with you on Global Insights.
Always a pleasure, and ladies and gentlemen, we can't go without acknowledging the presence of Haile Shranga and, of course, Caleb Muthina, and others that could not stay through to the end of the show. Thank you so much, Rita. We'll be doing this subsequently as we continue to put our voices to the global affairs. Just to note that when such meetings do occur, we do not think only about a symbolism. We don't see that as some sort of a diplomatic cutty, but we see intentional leaders trying to put the agenda of the global world of multipolarity to be a subtle, peaceful, and less chaotic. And that is why there is need for systematic approaches and even drastic approaches to solve the turbulence across the globe. We thank you, Adrian, for the excellent technical job, and we hope to be with you, ladies and gentlemen, subsequently to continue to talk what matters for Africa and the world at large. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Clarisse WIYDORVEN.
All the best.
Everyone. Thank you. It was great.
Bye.
Absolutely.
This program was brought to you by Globus.